For centuries, the European discovery narrative centered on Christopher Columbus. His name appears in textbooks, monuments, and cultural memory as the figure who opened the Western Hemisphere to Europe. Vikings get mentioned, sure, but the common story treats them as accidental arrivals. Storms push them off course, they land briefly on some foggy coast, then sail home and never return. That version is wrong, and the wood proves it. The real story starts with Greenland. In 985 AD, Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland for manslaughter, led settlers into Greenland's deep fjords. During his 3-year exile, he explored the coast and identified 2 habitable regions separated by hundreds of miles of barren ice. When his exile ended, he returned to Iceland with promises of green pastures and fertile land. The name Greenland was a deliberate marketing choice. The land wasn't uniformly green, Eric knew that, but he needed colonists, so he advertised strategically. 25 ships launched, 14 survived the crossing. The settlers who made it built farms, churches, workshops, and eventually a cathedral at Garðar. Greenland became the far western edge of the Norse world, a functioning colony with infrastructure, and that infrastructure made westward trips logistically possible. But Greenland had a fatal flaw: almost no timber. Summers barely lasted 3 months. Soils were thin and produced poor harvests, and the wood shortage was existential. Greenland supported only dwarf birch and willow, stunted shrubs barely suitable for kindling, let alone construction. Yet Norse survival depended on wood. Ships required large quantities of strong, straight timber, steering boards capable of enduring punishing ocean waves and Arctic ice. Houses needed beams and planks. Barns needed frames. Tools needed handles. Despite having no forests, Norse Greenlanders built boats, houses, and ocean-going vessels capable of crossing hundreds of miles of open water. So where did the timber come from? How was it acquired? And how often? That's the question a University of Iceland study finally answered. Archaeologists analysed 8,552 wooden fragments recovered from several Norse farmsteads in Greenland. Using microscopic identification methods, they determined species, growth patterns, and cellular structures. The work examined microscopic anatomy, cell size and arrangement, cell wall thickness, diagnostic features linked to specific tree families. Most fragments matched expected sources: driftwood from Siberian forests, carried by Arctic Ocean currents to Greenland's shores, pine and spruce from Scandinavia, arriving as trade goods and ship timbers transported by settlers and merchants across the North Atlantic, patterns that aligned with historical documents. But 26 fragments didn't fit. Oak, beech, hemlock, jack pine. None of these species grew in Greenland, Iceland, or Scandinavia, and they couldn't have arrived via the ocean currents that deliver Siberian driftwood. Their origin points to North America. Specifically, forests around the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the Labrador coast, where these trees grow in accessible coastal stands. These weren't random driftwood. The fragments showed clear human modification, cut marked from metal tools, work surfaces made for specific purposes, deliberate selection and processing. The timber came from freshly felled trees, cut from the bases of living stands, chosen for strength and quality, not collected as weathered debris washed onto beaches. And here's the geographic clincher. While Siberian driftwood can reach Greenland via Arctic sea ice drift, no ocean current could naturally carry hemlock or jack pine from the eastern North American coast to Greenland. The currents don't work that way, which means human action was required: cutting, loading onto ships, transporting across the Davis Strait, the body of water separating Greenland from North America. That's hundreds of miles of open ocean, in wooden ships, without engines or navigation systems beyond the sun, stars, and landmarks. All 26 North American wood pieces came from a single site. Garðar Cathedral, the seat of Greenland's bishop, the most powerful farmstead in the colony. That concentration matters. Only wealthy households could access such valuable material. North American timber was a luxury for elites, not something ordinary farmers could afford. It signals organized expeditions financed by those with resources to equip ships and crews for dangerous crossings. This wasn't a single desperate voyage. This was a pattern: repeated trips, sustained contact, and there's a second anchor: physical proof on the North American side. In 1960, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Norse settlement at Meadows, on the northern tip of Newfoundland. Longhouses, workshops, an iron smelting furnace, unmistakably Scandinavian. For decades, the site was dated broadly to around the year 1000. But in 2021, researchers achieved something extraordinary. They fixed Viking activity at the site to a specific year, 1021 AD. The method relied on cosmic radiation signatures preserved in tree rings. In 990 AD, a massive burst of cosmic rays hit Earth, producing a distinctive radiocarbon spike in tree rings worldwide. That spike is a marker, a timestamp embedded in wood from that year. Researchers found wood at Meadows containing that 992 marker. Then they counted rings outward from it. 29 rings, which means the trees were cut in 1021 AD. That's year-level precision, not a broad radiocarbon range. A specific date. Meadows is the earliest known European settlement in North America. It predates Columbus by nearly 5 centuries, and it proves Norse arrival, a confirmed foothold, even if brief. But was it brief, or was it part of something larger? The Greenland timber evidence suggests repeated returns, sustained contact, resources transported across the Davis Strait not once, but over what may have been decades or centuries. Meadows was likely not the only Norse site. It's just the only one we found so far, and it reflects a broader pattern. Recurring journeys, targeted resource extraction. Medieval Icelandic sagas, written around the year 1000, recount westward voyages to lands rich in forests, game, and resources. They specifically mention Greenlanders travelling to Markland for timber. Markland is identified with the Labrador coast. For a long time, scholars dismissed these saga accounts as fiction. Medieval fantasy. Entertaining stories with no historical basis, but the scientific evidence now supports them. The timber species match forests around the Gulf of St. Lawrence and Labrador. The worked wood shows deliberate harvesting. The concentration at elite sites shows organised expeditions. And Meadows provides a physical settlement matching the saga time frame and geography. The sagas weren't pure invention. They preserved a core of historical truth. Greenlanders really did sail west for timber. They really did establish at least one settlement in Newfoundland, and they really did transport North American wood back across the Atlantic. So what happened? Why did it end? The Greenlandic Norse vanished by the 1400s. Settlements faded. Farms were abandoned. The colony collapsed for multiple reasons. Cooling climate, declining trade with Europe, resource depletion, possibly conflict with Inuit populations moving south. Norse outposts in North America ended before Greenland's collapse. Meadows was deliberately abandoned. No valuables left behind. An orderly withdrawal, not a sudden catastrophe. But there's evidence of occasional later activity, possibly as late as 1145 AD, over a century after the site's founding, which suggests sporadic revisits even after the main occupation ended. The timber evidence from northern Greenland is among the strongest proof of sustained Viking activity in the New World. It confirms Atlantic crossings centuries before Columbus. It demonstrates deliberate harvesting and transport of North American resources. It shows contact spanning a long period, not a single accidental landing, and it validates saga narratives that scholars once dismissed as fantasy. The picture emerging from archaeology isn't Vikings stumbling onto America by accident. It's Vikings integrating North America into their world system, a distant but reachable resource zone. Western forests treated as an accessible supply source. Organized voyages, recurring extraction, transatlantic travel over long periods. That's a fundamentally different story than the one most people learned in school. Columbus didn't open the Americas to Europe. The Norse did, 5 centuries earlier. They just didn't colonize permanently or trigger the massive demographic and ecological transformations that followed 1492. But they were there, repeatedly, cutting timber, building settlements, sailing back and forth across the North Atlantic in wooden ships powered by oars and square sails. Continuing advances in archaeological methods and ongoing investigations will likely reveal additional Norse journeys, temporary camps, and possibly more settlements. The extent of Viking presence in North America remains an open question, but the core facts are settled. 26 pieces of wood, oak, beech, hemlock, jack pine, freshly cut from North American forests, transported to Greenland, used in elite construction, found at the bishop's seat, combined with a confirmed settlement in Newfoundland dated to 1021. Combined with saga accounts of timber voyages to western lands, combined with evidence of orderly withdrawal rather than catastrophic abandonment. The Vikings reached America. They stayed long enough to build, they returned multiple times, and they left behind proof in the one resource Greenland lacked, but North America had in abundance: timber, the foundation of Norse survival, the reason for westward voyages, the evidence Columbus never knew existed. Subscribe for more discoveries that rewrite what we thought we knew about the past.